Good morning. Good morning. How y'all doing? 8 o'clock in the morning. I appreciate y'all tuning in with me. Yeah, man. Monday morning check in. Appreciate you guys tuning in, sticking with me. We're going to keep doing this. And I feel like the more information we give out, the better. We can't ever not give out enough information. So I think it's important for us to continue to do these check ins every Monday morning. This next series, as you can see, we're calling it Pathways for Successful Reentry. Made a little changes on the audio. I felt like the audio was a little bad last time. Hopefully it's a little better for you. And then hopefully it's a little bit more structured. But anyway, appreciate you tuning in. Monday morning check-ins. We're going to do this every Monday morning at 8 a.m. Before we get started, my name is Conway Jr. Appreciate you guys hanging out. I just want to kind of ground things. I think there's a lot that's gone on since we last talked. We got us a first Black vice president, woman as well. We have a real chance to get some sensibility back into one of the most important offices in America. I think we get some alignment with what people want and people's values in this time. COVID has kind of switched lanes and is ravaging parts of the country that we didn't expect it to and anticipate. So people are homeschooling. There's a lot of stuff going on from home. And so, kind of thinking about that, what are you doing for self-care, right? I know, a lot of us have children. Um, some of us are blessed to have employment. Some of us aren't. So, what are you doing for self-care? What are you doing? Like for me, I'm cooking, right? I'm trying to cook. I'm trying to not eat as much as I was. I need to walk more and exercise more. I'm just not, I'm scared of the gym right now. So, um, what are you doing to make sure that the weight of the work isn't weighing on you so heavily that you're not able to give of yourself in a healthy way, right? I think this work approaches us, particularly reentry work, right? Um, I think it 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 wears on you in a way because it's an actual tangible thing that you see people exiting prison coming into this labyrinth that we on a normal basis just call life. Well, coming out of prison, it's a little different. um, so I want to talk about that last series, and then we're going to go into what this series is about. Was that last series helpful? Were you able to get some information? Was there value add to what you're doing? Did anyone you shared it with give you any feedback? Drop some comments, share your thoughts. If there's something else you think I should be talking about, don't hesitate. Tell me. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Um, if I miss some points, right? Some pluses and some deltas, as we say. Talk about, tell me if there were some things that, you think I was kind of nose blind on, or speaking from a place of privilege, or I didn't open up the space enough. And also, excuse me, just kind of t- tell me if you thought I could have done better. I want to create a community around this, right? Around reentry, and not just talking about what needs to happen, but what we can actually do in this moment, in this time, in this space, with the tools that we have to create some tangible solutions. So I'm going to revisit that original series, which I like to think was coming from the perspective of someone that needed reentry, right? It's coming from someone that went through 12 years of trying to navigate reintegrating into my community, my neighborhood, my city, uh, in a way that ultimately is a process of success. I don't think, success is a destination. I think it's a process. And so, and then Also, if you think I should be giving some more motivational stuff, let's talk about that too. Because there's a tension coming from when I came into the work. Before I got into policy work, I was a motivational speaker. And so I came into this work really encouraging people that they could do anything that they set their minds to. And then when I get into this policy world, there's this idea that you're you're kneecapped because the policies are crafted in a way that continue to disenfranchise and remove people from being able to access the best quality of life possible, right? Particularly if they have a criminal justice background. So, how I got into policy work was kind of organic, right? It was that, I had gone through 12 years of trying to find employment. That's what led me to being an entrepreneur. And I think that that's important too. I think we need to, honestly consider, even particularly in this space, right? Arcus Bullock is a great example of that, where, we can provide a digital um, employment opportunity based upon building a model that is specifically targeting folks, well, I want to say targeting, but inclusive of folks who are incarcerated and their loved ones and family members, advocates and allies, right? So I think entrepreneurship is where I was when I got into policy work. So in Austin, we were passing a fair chance hiring ordinance. What that means is you not only don't ask about a person's background as part of the application, taking that box off, but you don't even, you're not able to ask anything about the background until you offer them a job, right? And the logic is you're not going to do a background check on anybody that you're not going to hire, right? So what's the point in doing a background check before as opposed to after, right? So that fair chance hiring ordinance was crafted and led by a city council member that put together a group of former incarcerated leaders to move this bill forward, or this piece of legislation forward. And I think we were originally a stakeholder group, right, a working group, if you will, and we coalesced into a political club. And when we transformed from this working group to a political club, that is when I was elected political director, right? So I want you to pay attention to that. We went from being a working group to a political club. So that meant we were able to maneuver and navigate in a way politically that we couldn't as a working group, right? So that experience led me to being hired as a criminal justice organizer with a local group in Austin. One of the campaigns that I immediately worked on was the Freedom Cities, which was a derivative of an ACLU national campaign that was addressing immigration, but also criminal justice, in a way that in Texas and in the southern states, folks were being pulled over in a way that allowed the cops to create an on-ramp to deportation through these low-level stops. Not having on a seatbelt, not having a driver's license, less than 2 ounces of weed, all of these so-called quality of life type of traffic stops that often lead to deportation issues. We created a campaign where the city council would pass a resolution that would force the police department to stop arresting these folks and the DA to stop prosecuting these people, right? So in that way, or in that moment, going from being a former incarcerated advocate to going to work for an organization allowed me to help push policy that created a way for people that with my background wouldn't get pulled over, particularly if they're on parole or probation, right? And so what I'm trying to lay out to you is that it was important for us to be as people with lived experience, not only part of the execution of it, but we were part of leading it. So back to the fair chance hiring thing, once we passed it at the city level, it got challenged at the state level. Once it got challenged at the state level, we were forced to lead an effort to preserve it. That meant I was transitioning from local politics to state politics, and I was having to learn the difference between advocacy and lobbying, right? Advocating and lobbying, and learning a whole different set of tools in dealing with state policymakers as opposed to city policymakers, right? But that also gave me a different level of interaction and a different level of navigating the policy level on a way that we were not only um, able to advocate for ourselves by testifying, but we were playing the inside game where we were going into these offices and getting to know the staff and getting to know the policy directors and getting to know, oftentimes I never really even talked to a lawmaker. That's how you can tell how effective you are. If the staff knows you, then you're doing your job. If the lawmaker knows you, you understand that? But so what that meant was we were seen in a way that ordinarily we wouldn't be seen because we took an issue that initiated at the municipal level but directly impacted folks that had spent their lives trying to transition from prison into society. And that was the pathway into policy. Now, that doesn't always happen. And that happened 15 years after I was out of prison. So in this moment, you got people coming, I got a brother right now that did 47 years in prison, and he hasn't been home a year. He has a job now, but can you imagine just what the internet was 10 years ago? Can you imagine what the internet was 20 years ago? And then I want you to imagine what the digital age was 40 years ago, almost 50 years ago when he went to prison. And now he's coming out and we're using Gmail and email, and we're asking folks to kind of acclimate themselves to a condition or a society that really isn't set up for them. So anyway, I just want to kind of give you the backstory on why I'm going into this next series of videos about, trying to create these successful pathways to reentry. The takeaways from my on-ramp into policy work was we were often called on to testify, but we weren't always called on to strategize, right? And so we were called on to execute a plan that we weren't part of crafting. The closer we got to the crafting of the plan, the more we were able to be bought into the execution of the plan, right? So most times when we talk about people who are directly impacted, we want to bring them in to testify. We want to bring them in and tell their story to a lawmaker. But when it comes time to really strategize about why you're asking them to testify, those folks aren't at the table. And I think that that's where we have to think about reentry in a different way, right? We need to bring in people who have actually gone through the process, whether it be a family member or whether it be somebody that's been locked up before. We got to bring them into the strategy early in before we begin to execute any tactics, right? So bringing folks into the room early is important. Make sure that there's room at the table, right? I'm speaking metaphorically, but make sure that when we bring folks in the room, that we're not just asking them to just sit there and be a holding place, right? So, and I think the other takeaway from my policy experience was that oftentimes we'll pacify directly impacted folks by making sure that they show up in the articles, that making sure that they show up as kind of the poster child of these efforts, right? And that passivity or not passivity, pacifying folks in that way gives us some semblance of a voice, right? Well, one thing I learned in the music business is the closer you are to the microphone, the further you are from the money. In other words, the closer you are to being the face of it, the further you are from being behind the strategy, right? And so we want to bring folks who are the faces of reentry into the strategy conversation as well. So this new series, as you can see, Pathways for Successful Reentry, takeaways from, we're going to be talking about, see if we can roll that for you. 3 key areas, right? Where, I believe that efforts relating to reentry, they should be aimed at one objective: advocating for access to support, skills, transitional or permanent housing. Folks need food. Folks need basic necessities. They need mental health, physical health, financial support, not only for themselves, but the community in which they're returning to. So this next set of videos, we're going to talk about each Monday. We're going to talk about building pathways for successful community integration, right? And some of this I took from several sources. I'll share those sources with you through the takeaways. But over the next coming weeks, we're going to unpack strategies, we're going to unpack advocacy, we're going to unpack language, right? So, I feel like this is for, again, allies, organizers, advocates, and comms directors, right? Because we're going to begin to learn a new inclusive language where we're not excluding people, right? So, sometimes I think it's difficult for allies and advocates, particularly allies, to know where they fit in this cycle. And so I think the more we craft out solutions that are based in leaning into people's expertise, and people are experts in their own conditions, I think when we bring those folks to the table early, we begin to craft out plans and lay out tactics, and not so much be worried about, how are we going to create a buzz, but how are we going to create an impact? In California, they're talking about releasing 18,000 people at one time, and the community organizations are scrambling because they're trying to figure out where we're going to put these people in the midst of a pandemic. So we got to be pragmatic. We got to be thinking long term, but we also got to be thinking with an urgency that how we're going to put people to work, how we're going to make sure that they have housing, how we're going to make sure that they're able to maintain that job, maintain that housing, and get some health care, right? So that means we got to stop thinking outside of services. We got to stop thinking outside of how can we fund this organization to do this work, right? How can we create a system within that municipality that is responsible for this work, right? So bringing the system closer to the issue as we bring people who are directly impacted closer to the issue. Now, I'm not saying that we give over control to governmental agencies. What I'm saying is that we demand that they do their job. We put the Department of Corrections in an easy space by just allowing them to incarcerate people without demanding that they educate them, without demanding that they provide adequate health care, without demanding that they come out from out of that incarceration with a skill set that allows them to do the same type of work that's going to be able to be something that they can live on. Because we all know who have been to prison, the jobs that you do in prison, you can't do in a free world and get paid for. And even if you are certified, there's so many restrictions at the state level that those licenses and certifications don't matter, right? So we got to figure out how can we not only work at the legislative level, how can we work at the advocacy level, and how can we work at the um, communications level to create successful pathways, right? So we're going to talk about these strategies over the next couple of weeks. Um, and we're going to do this every Monday morning. I might even eventually actually go live, but I don't know yet. We'll see. Anyway, if there are any questions, make sure you tell somebody about this, subscribe, click all the links. I decided to go ahead and make my first book available as an ebook free. If you click the link below, share it with someone that just came home from prison, so I wrote it. I felt like it was for somebody, kind of information I needed. Excuse me. For when I came home from prison. So that's available in the links. Subscribe. Make sure you share it. Tell somebody about this series. And I will see you next Monday, 8 o'clock a.m. right here doing the same thing. All right. And remember, people are not the worst days of their lives for the rest of their lives. All right. Appreciate you.